end, if that's okay? Cool. Okay. So my next question, do you feel that cosplayers who are different, be it, cosplayers of different genders, races, sizes, anyone who's not just, who doesn't look exactly like the character in terms of like physical build, do you think that they're held to a different standard? Because there's been some criticism that, for example, cosplayers of color or plus size cosplayers are held to a different standard, for say on Tumblr, and people think that they're getting an easier pass. They're allowed to, quote unquote, have costumes that aren't as good and people will like them anyway just because they're black or just because they're fat or they're Hispanic or whatever. Do you feel that that is a thing, and how would you respond?
Well, I've noticed more it's actually they seem to be singled out is more the deal. And there's actually, it's just like the spotlight is put on them, and it's just like, I find that it doesn't do anybody any good, just because then sometimes it'll be like, oh yeah, well that's, then they start making, identifying factors like, oh yeah, it's the black Sailor Moon. Oh yeah, it was, the overweight Chi, or it was the, then it's just like, no, that was the Chi. That was the Sailor Moon character. And I think, and I actually have noticed, because they are singled out, that a lot of them, I've seen, they step up their game.
Yeah.
Just really pretty awesome. Like, they have all like, their seams are like finished perfectly. They got all the exquisite little details, embroideries, the makeup is done perfectly, the wigs are like exact. And it's just, so I guess it's I just wish that it was less that, you would single them out because of that fact, or just use like the cosplayers too, like, oh yeah, there's the guy who dressed up as, Haruhi, and it's like, no, that's a Haruhi cosplayer, there's a difference. Mm-hmm. So I just wish they were less singled out, and I don't think they're exactly held to it. They're held to their almost own standard, and it's just, I don't know, I just wish they were less singled out.
Yeah.
The word cosplay is not gender specific. You are a cosplayer and you are a cosplayer. Be proud of that. I feel like people who make fun or single out other people are not the kind of people that you need to be paying attention to or you need to focus on. If you have people that are like that in your group of friends, you need to find a good group of friends, because that is really negative behavior, and we do not want to encourage that, because let's be honest, what happened back in history when we single out people for religion and race and other things? Bad things happened. We're smarter than that. We can get past this. This is like the 20th century.
I think it's important to ask exactly what you're talking about, because I feel that there's a big divide between cosplay culture and cosplay celebrity. And I feel that there's a lot of acceptance in cosplay culture. I can walk down the hall and people won't be like, oh look, it's the fat Wonder Woman. They'll just be like, that's an awesome costume, that's really cool. But if I went out to Facebook and got onto like Nerdist costume of the week or something like that, then they would be like, oh look, it's fat Wonder Woman. And it seems like in celebrity culture, there's only room for one. There's room for one fat person and one black person, and you know what I mean? It's like there can be a whole bunch of white girls doing it, and there can, because of cosplay's, not origin in, but coming filter through Asian culture in the United States, it's okay for Asians, but for Hispanics and blacks especially, it seems like there can only be one. And there can only be one guy who's popular right now.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really an issue when you think there can only be one. You start setting up competition instead of camaraderie amongst the people that are trying to do it. Mm-hmm. And there's enough competition amongst the celebrity culture anyway, because there's only so much money to go around in cosplay.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I don't mean with celebrities, I mean, I don't know what any of that is like, but For example, amongst black cosplayers, a lot of times, we'll see our pictures get reblogged on Tumblr and you start to read the notes, which never read the notes. But you start to read the notes and people, you'll have people like, oh, that's a great costume because of the costume. Or, oh, that's a great black version of whatever. And then you have the people who are like, that costume's not that great and this is only being reblogged because you guys want to seem forward thinking and you want to seem like, oh, you're okay with plus size cosplayers, or you're okay with cosplayers of color, or you're okay with that cosplayer because she's in a wheelchair. That's the only reason why you like her. And so it's more about using their otherness almost to hold them at a lower standard. They're saying, oh, that costume's not as good, and if it was on a white girl, you wouldn't like it.
I think it works both ways. I think it does, because there's also, I have found myself doing this, and I hit myself every time I do it, but I think I hold the pretty white model girls to a higher standard than I hold most other cosplayers. If I see that they're larger or of a different race or something that would not usually put them in that culture, I think I have a tendency to give them a little bit more of a pass, because it seems like they're not trying for the sparkle, so they're more community people instead of the kind that I usually associate with wanting fame and not camaraderie.
Exactly.
I was just thinking, this actually kind of reminds me a little bit how competing against child cosplayers kind of reminded me.
Yeah,
It's like, if there's a child cosplayer in the group, it's like, well, I just lost. There's just, because it's like the child must always win. And that actually almost bothers me because I competed in horseback riding as a child, and I competed against adults, and if I didn't ride well enough, I didn't win. And it made me want to get better until I got to the point I was the better rider. It wasn't because I was, a child that they gave me goodie points. It was because I got good enough to do it. And I almost want to do that with cosplay. I want people to so there's your beginning level. I say, and then you have stuff to look forward to, because otherwise you're going to be really disappointed when you start hitting teenage years when it's like you don't win anything anymore. Yeah,
we've actually got a little girl in the Dallas-Fort Worth cosplay community. I want to say she's about 10 or 11 years old. Her name is Reese. Her costumes are incredible. Incredible on an actual, an adult cosplay scale. Not because she's cute, not because she's 10, not because, oh my gosh, look at that little girl dressed as the Borg. She's actually a really good cosplayer. And I think that holding her to, not just giving her a pass because she's cute and she's young, it will actually help her more in the future, because, she's not gonna think, oh, okay, my seams aren't, finished, but I'm gonna enter this costume anyway, and, why am I not winning anymore? And so that's why, I really think it's important to keep, not to other people and not to put them in, different boxes, because it really doesn't help anyone. So, cool. All right, my next question. Since, we've had some plus-size cosplayers start to speak up, we've had some cosplayers of color start to speak up, we've even had some cosplayers of different, sexual orientations start to speak up about the way that they are treated in the community. Since that started happening, there's almost been kind of a backlash in response to, the pleas for more diversity, better representation, things like that. So how would you respond to those who would call cosplayers who are pushing for change whiny and would tell them to, just make their own scene if they don't like this one?
Well, it's kind of a lot like just basic feminist rights, or kind of a lot of the whole thing is kind of like, well, what's it's like women get raped. It's like, well, men get raped too. Why are we talking about them? It's like, well, we're talking about everybody, but the men. It's like, no, everybody. We want everybody to be equal. We want everybody to have fun. It's like, but what about this group? It's like, no. When we say everybody, we mean everybody. You're included too. We promise. And it's almost like trying to reassure them, hold their hand. It almost draws more attention to that.
It dilates it sometimes.
Yeah, so it's more of a just, back off, stay to your message, which is like, all right, I want everybody to be equal. And if someone does bring up, well, what about this? You'll address it one time, and it's like, okay, well, let's see if that is actually an issue. If it is, all right, we'll address it. And then with the everybody needs to be equal, and then, all right, move on. And it's just kind of, don't let them get up on their soapbox. It's kind of what I think is a good way to deal with it.
I refer to it sometimes as the oppression Olympics. One person starts talking about having it bad, and someone's like, well, we have it bad too, and so why are you getting all this attention? We should get attention too. It's like, you having an issue doesn't negate the fact that I also have an issue. We both have an issue. We all have an issue. Let's solve the issue and not try to prove whose issue is worse than, you know, the other person. Go ahead.
Honestly, I think the other thing is, with these issues, we do need to keep pressing the issue and presenting it, because as the world becomes more connected via the internet and via everything, we need to be sure that everybody gets the message that you're trying to send. Like, everybody is equal. We want that, and we want to keep pushing that. And I actually read this. It's actually a business thing, but it applies the same thing. The business aspect is, if there's an issue with a company, the only way they're going to change it is if you keep persisting as the customer. The same thing applies to this. If we keep persisting as a group, trying to promote these equality rights, these things, treating everybody equally, then something's gonna happen. Because if we just kind of fall back on the wayside, nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Okay. My next question. It's almost the word accuracy has almost become like a double-edged sword and a dirty word in the cosplay community, because on one hand you have accuracy as it relates to, you know, the wig, the costume, the shoes, the props, the makeup, the contacts. You have that level of accuracy, but then you have people who are almost lampooning this word against people who don't fit the ideal image that they have as a cosplayer. And so my question is that, being that cosplay is such a visual, such an aesthetic hobby, how would you respond to people who claim that their preferences for accuracy is justification to block people from, you know, from cosplaying characters that don't quote unquote look like them? Like, where do you think the costume stops?
I always say that you have the perfect right to tell me what to cosplay. My cosplays cost about $1,000. My time costs $20 an hour.
That's one way to handle it.
You want to pay me, I'll wear whatever you want, as long as I cover decency laws.
I mean, it's kind of like, you know, just people hiding behind their privilege too. Like, so this, you know, so it's white privilege or male privilege or just, you know, middle class privilege, higher society privilege. You know, it's kind of like you hide behind the whole, like, and a lot of people will do that, and they'll hide their hate behind this front of, it's like, oh, well, I have a perfectly justifiable means. It's just like, no, you have a really horrible agenda behind this. You're just hiding it with, you're whitewashing the front, and you're making it look good, and it really, it's a justification for hate, and it's just, it kind of depends on, I'm not even sure where I'm gonna go with that. It's just, it's a hard issue to attend to. I mean, it's because we had a cosplay friend, Amber, who's black, and she wanted to do this demonic character who had this white face, and she was torn between if she was going to actually paint her face or if she was just going to go out and do it as is. And she actually found kind of this happy medium. She found this really cool texture makeup that added this really like shadowy effect to her face. So it actually ended up looking even cooler than if she had tried to go for the, you know, the accuracy of the character. Because I mean, when I say white, I mean like paper white, because it was a demon and they don't have normal colors. And so it was really, it was a hard issue too. And also, yeah, just any of those, like, is it justification? Not really. It's putting a front on something that's ugly.
I'll be honest, I have such a background in costume construction that the first thing I look at is a costume and then the person. I'll be like, oh my gosh, that is a stunning cosplay of like whatever character it is, and I'll be like, oh wow, you're African American, wow, whoa, surprised. But I'm like, oh, look at those perfect pleats, or look at that beautiful seam, and I forget this, and it's really just me because I love the art of cosplay rather than, you know, looking at, oh well, your body type isn't perfect. I don't care. I love the fact that you actually want to run around in costume. That is okay to me. And so that's really like, that's how I view it, is it's an art, and everybody should be able to portray their art. Art is not a single defined thing. You can be anything or anybody you want.
You know, and that's the magic of cosplay, is that it is art and it is so fluid and it's got so much room for creative interpretation. Like we were talking again yesterday, I think during the cosplay contest about like mashup characters, or we were talking about it somewhere, just mashup characters and, you know, original characters and characters where you have more creativity, and it almost, and sometimes it becomes a little bit more fun because you're not, you know, super zeroed in on all the details. But when other people try to use those very same details against you, you know, it almost negates the entire reason you cosplay. I mean, this isn't a full-time job. Unless you're a designer, it isn't a full-time job for any of us, and so I really don't, you know, I agree. It's an art and we should treat it as such.
I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that we're not being paid to do this. They see actors and they think we should look like actors. But actors are paid to have their body type and their image. And we're just people walking around in fun for ourselves. And we need to do more education of the public about, well, we don't dress up for your benefit. Yeah, we do get attention, but if I never had another person take my picture or tell me, hey, I like your costume, and I never had another person look at me, I would still be making costumes because I have that drive to create them. And I think that's a lot of things that people don't understand until they start cosplaying, that it's not for you, it's not for attention, it's for me and because it makes me feel better. So, your opinion really doesn't matter. It sounds harsh that way, but it doesn't. You have to. You won't last long if you're not cosplaying for yourself.
It really is a labor of love. Like, something that you create, the person that made them is so proud of that. Even if you didn't make it, but you spent the time hunting for that perfect accessory or that perfect jacket or whatever, they do it for themselves. And that is a real self-confidence booster. And something like that, I think we should greatly encourage.
Yeah, I think it goes back to privilege too. People feel privileged to, you know, tell these cosplayers, I don't like the way you look. You should change what you're doing because it's not aesthetically pleasing to me. Well, you know, this person hasn't been in their room sewing this garment, painting this prop, you know, styling this wig for hours just because, you know, of this one random guy they're walking past at a con. What is he going to think? You do it for yourself because it is very much labor of love. Awesome.
Actually, I want to touch on something for a second that I've been going through a lot recently, but I think it comes in cycles for all cosplayers. We sit here and we say cosplay for yourself and do it as a labor of love, but I think it's important to remind people that we all go through low points. If you guys go to my blog, dramaticthreads.com, my first post on there is about how recently I've been feeling very judged and very down, and not on my best game. And I've been feeling pressure. And that's something that we don't talk about a lot, is that there's a lot of pressure out there to conform, and that's normal. And you will go through those cycles, and you will go through the cycles of like, why am I still doing this? Nobody likes me, everything is horrible. Everybody does that. I've been doing this for 15 years and I just had one. I'm good friends with top cosplayers who make a living at this. They go through this. So just having the cycle is not an indication that you need to stop or you need to find something else to do. We all do it, and I think that's something we really should talk about, that we keep giving lip service to be confident and have fun. It's not always fun, and you're not always confident, and that's okay.
I think some of that might actually go back to some of the cosplay celebrity culture that you were speaking on earlier. Now that, I mean, I started in like 2008, and back then you didn't have, you know, like Nerdist spotlights, and, you know, you didn't have like cosplayers splashed all over CNN, you know, cosplayers on TV, things like that. And as it became more mainstream and started to get more attention, we did have, you know, a select few cosplayers, you know, like start to get pushed into the spotlight. And a lot of people, you know, especially old school people who've been around, you know, since the early 2000s and the 90s are like, you know, I've been here for 10 years. How am I not, how come I don't have like millions of fans on Facebook and I'm not on TV and stuff like that, and are my costumes not as good? You know, that is a very, very normal thing to think and feel, especially now with, you know, the way cosplay culture is kind of evolving. So, okay. My next question, how would you respond to people who claim that female cosplayers need to get used to, just deal with, and just live with the fact that we get, you know, creepy comments at you look ready. So we get creepy comments at conventions, we get harassed at conventions, I've been grabbed, I've had people, you know, try to push my boyfriend away from me at a con to get near me. I mean, you name it, I've had it. And, you know, when we speak up about this, people claim that we are just being hysterical, that we're making this up for attention, and that it's somehow like sexy and desirable to be sexually assaulted and harassed. And so how would you respond to people who think that it's just part of the territory?
Cosplay is not consent. Just because I'm dressed up like a character doesn't mean you get to do with me like I'm your Barbie doll. That's not how that works. It's just because, you know, you're dressed up as a character, and yeah, sometimes it's fun to be in the character, but no, sexual harassment, sexual assault, just, you know, harassment and assault, period, are just, you don't do that to people, because they are people, and it's unfortunately, we live kind of in a patriarchal society where women are constantly, and men and women are taught to look at women as objects. They are not people. You do things to women. Men do things to other people, yes, but women are like, you know, this is my woman phone. I say, I will do things to it versus, you know, once I put it down, it won't do anything on its own. A woman should be able to do what she wants, and that's with anybody, whether, you know, you're transgender, you're gay, you're a person of color, anything different. It's like, no, you are autonomous, you are your own being, so it is not okay for people to treat you like you're less than human, which is what is happening when people are, you know, they're coming up and they're like, hi, I like your boobs, honk honk. No, that is not cool, that is not what you do, that's just not acceptable behavior. And it's basically, there's multiple ways to deal with it. My way is outrage immediately. It's like, no, we do not do that. That is not acceptable. You are not allowed to do that. I say, and even, that's why I also like encouraging people, always ask before you come up and hug someone, before you even take a picture of them, because it can be kind of creepy. Like, I'll just be sitting down in a hallway in costume and someone will just come up and take my pictures. Like, okay, that's a little weird, maybe just ask first, because normally I'm totally okay with it, because I'll stand up, I'll do poses, I'll interact with you, but you need to ask first.
I really just want to say what she said, but no, it's true. People are people, and everybody deserves to be treated with respect. And just keep that in mind when anybody is addressing you, or you are addressing anyone, doesn't matter who. Just be respectful. That is the simplest thing, and most of the time, we'll be okay with it. If you're like, hey, can I give you a hug? Oh, sure, yeah, I'll give you a hug. Or if we're not that comfortable, we'll be like, oh, no, but if you want, I can pose for a picture for you. That is totally fine. Communication and respect is key.
I think it goes back to, again, educating the public that we don't do this for them. That costuming has nothing to do with the people around us, that we're doing it for ourselves, will help them realize that it's the same thing. You're no different when you're wearing a costume. And I think it's also important to note that this happens to guys too. There's actually a really big problem in anime culture.
Oh yeah.
Where we have lots of young girls who like yaoi, and they see people, they see boys cosplaying, and they go up to them and they start being rude and harassing and horrible, grabbing things, telling them they need to kiss, and that is harassment. And that is an underculture that we need to deal with, telling those girls that is not appropriate, just as much as it's not appropriate for guys. And I'm not trying to say, well, girls have it easy, because that is not true. But I think it's important to recognize that we need to teach everybody to keep their hands to themselves.
I think part of that too, it goes into, men don't feel as empowered to speak up. If that happens to a guy at a convention, they don't feel like they can go report it to security without getting laughed out the door. Like you're this giant macho guy and you're trying to tell security that a 13-year-old girl is sexually assaulting you. They're like, what are you even talking about, bro? So, I mean, and that's definitely just a shady, seedy underside to it that we really don't talk about very often.
And I guess there are two ways to deal with it. How I deal with it is I go to conventions where I feel safe. Mm-hmm. I mean, Naka Kon has done a lot to try and be an inclusive convention. Last year when I was chair, I sat down with another guy and we wrote up an extensive harassment policy that we instituted at this con. The person in charge of instituting it, our security director, is transgender. So they understand a lot of these issues and they're passionate about them. And the staff is trained to the person to not brush aside these issues. And you can deal with it by only going to conventions where people have harassment policies and are willing to listen to them, or you can work to get conventions to be more accepting, or you can do both. But I think we need to prong our attack and start not only working towards things, but recognizing conventions that do it right, that we feel safe in. And letting people know.
I mean, it's kind of the consumerism thing. So it's like, okay, so I really want to go to this convention, but they have a very unclear harassment policy, or they don't have one at all. Write them, let them know, hey, I would love to go to this convention, but I don't feel safe, or I don't feel comfortable going here without a more clear harassment policy. Is there any way you could help institute one? Or hey, I love this other convention and they have this great harassment policy. Is there any way you could adopt something like that? Because if you let people know, and enough people do it, they will do it. I say they will listen, because they, eventually a lot of the conventions, they're trying to survive. They're trying to, make enough money so that they keep doing what they're doing. And so if we let them know, well, I'm not going to go here if I don't feel safe, then they're like, okay, we need to change.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of conventions, if you start getting into con running culture, you'll realize that even though anime cons are very diverse, the con running culture is still an older white guy game. And so they don't understand the need for things like that. Mm-hmm. And we need to educate them that, yeah, that's important.
If you guys, I don't know if y'all have checked out the Mary Sue, they have done extensive reporting on conventions that do have very, very, very inclusive anti-harassment policies. And they also report on conventions who don't. So yeah, it does. It goes back to consumerism. You need to give your dollars to conventions where you feel safe. If you don't feel safe at whatever con, it doesn't make sense to keep going, because if they're not going to see a reason to change. So, awesome. Okay, this one is kind of a hard one and somewhat of a personal one for me. Recently we've had some, I guess the best word would be drama online, where we've had photographers start to come out and say that they don't have, like, for example, cosplayers of color, or a lot of male cosplayers, or plus size cosplayers in their portfolios, because they're just not seeing a lot of quote unquote inspiring work by those groups. Do you think that just the fact that they don't see them means that they don't exist? Is that a valid excuse? Or
I think actually to a degree they don't exist, because they don't feel comfortable cosplaying. So it's kind of like, okay, because a lot of times in the past it's kind of like, well, I could go out and I could invest all this money and spend all this time, do the research, make this great character, and come out and go, ha ha, you look stupid. And then it's just like, why would I do that to myself? So it's just, I think, so that's why we need to encourage them to come out and cosplay and show your stuff. Show how cool you are. Show how awesome your stuff is. Because one of the best ways to shut people up is to prove them wrong and be awesome. So it's more of, I think we need to promote those of our friends and other people in the community that are good cosplayers, that are considered, the other or whatever, and not one of the exact ideal that they're looking for, because then it'll help them get out there, and then that way the photographers, you know, they'll have no choice but do it, because they're going to be the ones winning the cosplay contest, and they're going to be the ones out there, you know, kicking butt and taking names. So.
Yes. But no, really